Hello, everyone. Welcome to Scott's RPG Reviews. It's been a while since I've done a review. Been busy this winter, and then the weather's just been kind of a nightmare. But it's been a really busy couple of months, December and January, and I had the opportunity to run something I've been wanting to run for a long time, and that's the Blade Runner First Case File Electric Dreams. So I wanted to talk about it. I'm going to try to avoid spoilers whenever possible in this one. But I want to talk about it, my impressions of it, and my impressions of both the game and the mechanics, and kind of how I think Blade Runner is really different from a lot of RPGs that you classically think of. So, if you're not aware, Electric Dreams is the first case file in the Blade Runner RPG. It's part of the starter set. So, it's a little frustrating because you have to buy the starter set to get that case file, but then you probably ultimately want to buy the core book, rule book, which has a complete rule set. And I actually have both. And they've got a second case file that's out as well, which I'll run eventually. So it runs under a modified version of Year Zero engine. As opposed to the dice pools where you're rolling lots of six-sided dice trying to get successes. The way the Blade Runner RPG works is your stats dictate what die you roll, 6, 8, 10, or 12, or 20-sided dice, and then anything higher to 6 is a success, and you're looking to get typically 1 success out of your die rolls, and you typically are rolling 2, maybe on occasion 3 dice, which ends up being, by the way, I discovered, very punishing to the players in terms of getting those successes they need. So let's talk about the case file itself and talk about my impressions of running it. The book itself, the case book, is written really well. It's well structured. It explains things well. Everything is laid out. When I was running, I wasn't having to do a lot of flipping from section to section like I do in some other RPGs. Virtually all the information that I needed was there. I had to backfill very little, which was very nice. It gave you everything you needed and laid it out really well. I think you could probably run this game in probably 2 sessions of 3 hour each, or one long 8-hour session or 6-hour session. That's about how long it takes. Maybe 3 sessions. We got through the first 4-hour session. We're about a third of the way through. So actually probably it'll take us 3 sessions to get through. Now, let's talk about what makes this RPG, in some respects, radically different from any other typical RPG you run, other than just the setting, which is just unbelievable. I think there are a couple of things in particular that are really important to realize that makes this different from a classic RPG. The first one is, and this is probably the most important thing that you want to stress to the players, is that this is a detective case and is inherently a race against time, which is you have to get all the pieces together before the bad guy, whoever they may be, gets away. If you keep the party together, you're never going to be able to complete all the steps necessary to get all the evidence together. You've really got to split apart the party, which is really different from most RPGs where they say never split apart the party, never split apart the party. You have to split apart the party, and you want to stress that to your players when they go and say, look, don't send everybody to the same location. You've got 4 players. Ideally, you want to send them to 3 or 4 locations during each shift, and we'll talk about what that means in a little bit. Because in order to complete everything in time, you've got to split everything up and get evidence. From a player perspective, they have little tablets, KPI, I can't remember what they're called. Little tablets which allow them to share information. So unless they really want to do something in secret, which you typically don't, you can have everybody at the table while you're going through it. What that does mean is that because you're splitting up the party, you're running that classic question of how do you keep people from getting bored. The way I did it was I kind of kept an internal timer, and I did what in movie parlance would be called cutscening, which is you go to one person or one group at one location, you talk about what they're going to do, you go through their stuff, and at somewhere between 5 and 10 minutes, you say, okay, we're going to cut scene and go to the next group, and then you go around until everybody's finished all the stuff they want to do in their location. So you don't have like a half an hour long discussion with one person in one scene. You do 5 or 10 minutes with this group, then 5 or 10 minutes with this person, then 5 or 10 minutes with this person, and you come back around and you just find really good points where you can say, we're going to cut scene here and go over to the next person. That's a really effective way to keep people from being bored. So that's the first thing you want to stress. Now, the second thing you want to realize in this game is that in some respects it's kind of structured in a weird board game-esque way, which is the game is divided into shifts. And each shift, because of the city and the way it is, one person can go to one location. So you've got this big Los Angeles and you say, okay, here's your 4 people. We're in shift 1. Where do you want to go? And each person says, I'm going to go over here to talk to this person. I'm going to go over here and look for this. And I'm going to go over here and search this building. And so each person does one thing in one shift. And I don't want to get too heavily into the mechanics, but people have to take shifts to rest and all that kind of stuff. So otherwise they suffer stress. So the game is structured in almost a turn-based system where it's okay, what are you going to do on your turn, your shift? That also lets you measure time pretty well and measure progress pretty well, because you can say, okay, they've gone 3 shifts in. Here's all the information they gathered. Are they behind? Are they ahead? Are we going to end early? The shift system I really like. It divides up the adventure into really useful segments. And on top of that, when you go into the GM book and you read it, there's a flow chart which says, okay, after the initial case briefing at headquarters, here's the locations they know about. And if they go here and they do what they need to do, they're going to find about these locations. And if they go over here, they're going to find out about these locations. And there may be 2 locations that point to the same direction and so on and so forth. But it gives you a nice kind of decision tree or information tree where you can say, okay, have they gone to all the necessary locations to put all the pieces together? And with the shift system and everything, it fits together well. So these are the 2 things which make this run really different from a standard RPG. One is this concept of splitting apart the party, and the other one is shifts. Yes, you have time in RPGs. You have days and rest periods and all that. But here it's really, really structured. And you want to be aware of that is that you could probably adjust that if you wanted to. I think it works very well. It's like, okay, you're in shift 1. What locations do you want to go to? Okay, shift 1 is over. Shift 2, who wants to go where? Okay, we're in shift 3. Who's going to go where? That's the game itself. I really, really, I haven't gotten all the way through this adventure yet, but so far, I really liked the game. I think the book is really good. The plot is very compelling. A lot of people will talk about the fact that there are some tropes that come from the movies that are revisited, not verbatim, but close in this particular adventure. And I have a feeling that all the adventures will have tropes that come in that are revisited from the movies. I don't think that's a bad thing. I think the typical person that's attracted to playing this game as opposed to classic cyberpunk is looking for the tropes that are in the movie, in the second movie, and in the books. I think they're looking for that experience, so having those common tropes is good. And they're sufficiently different as if you're saying, oh, well, if I watch the movie, then I know what the end is. No, that's not true. There are some very different things. There are some reveals in the game that can be pretty shocking to players. And by the way, this is something they talk about in the game itself, is that this is a cyberpunk, weird combination of cyberpunk and noir. The themes that they're dealt with can be pretty heavy. And you want to make your players aware is that this is not a sweetness and light RPG. If you want a sweetness and light RPG, go somewhere else. If you want a dungeon crawl, maybe play Alien. These deal some pretty heavy psychological issues, and they come up as reveals as you investigate investigate the case. And they also make really good breakpoints. I will tell you is that I did my first breakpoint when this really massive reveal came out, where we discovered that the players discovered something really, really awful. And they discovered this. I said, okay, congratulations. We've been going for 4 hours. We're stopping here. You get to chew on that for the next, it's going to be 2 months, and then we're going to play again. So be aware the themes here are very dark. They can be very heavy. And that's it. So in general, and by the way, I ran this in person. I'm not sure whether I'd run this online. I'm not a big online GM or GM anyway. I prefer in person. I think this works much better in person. There are a few mechanics I have not tried yet. We have not done the chase mechanic yet, and so I'll see how that goes, and I'll let you guys know how the chase mechanic works with the cards. In addition, in that core box, the props tend out to be really useful. Interestingly, the most useful item in the box were the mugshot cards, where they have pictures of all the various personalities that the players are going to encounter. I pulled that out, and every time they went somewhere and met someone, I pulled that card out and put it out. It kind of reminded me of if you played the tabletop game Detective City of Angels. It's a board game. It's kind of Clue on steroids. They have cards which have all the suspects on them, and they get exposed throughout the game. This is kind of the same idea. And the player said, this is really useful because even though we've written all this down, having the pictures there reminding us of who is really helpful, because, I mean, we're only about a third of the way through the case file now, and we've still got about 7 or 8 people that they're dealing with, and they're starting to have a hard time tracking who's who and the names and all that kind of stuff. So the props are good. The maps are good. The pictures and handouts, definitely worthwhile. Definitely useful because, particularly in investigating, they look at a picture and they say, okay, did we look at this? Did we look at this? Did we look at this? It works really well. So far, I'm about a third of the way through it, and I'll do a review when we get done as well. It'll be probably 6 months or a year, but I want to do one now saying this is a really interesting RPG. It is definitely very genre specific. Unlike classic medieval fantasy or maybe typical science fiction, the players and the GM have to be invested in the genre, in that cyberpunk genre and the film noir detective genre. I'm not saying you have to go out and watch the Blade Runner films. Obviously, it helps a whole lot. But you've got to be invested in that kind of genre and that kind of style in order for this game to be fun. We've got a third of the way through the game and no combat yet. No combat. We've had no combat yet. It's all been about explore. I tend to run games that are not combat heavy anyway. This one even less so. It's mostly about identifying and exploring stuff and asking people questions. Last thing I want to cover is the year 0 modification, where they've gone from the dice pools to you rolling 2 dice looking for 6s, and your stats indicate what types of dice you roll. That ended up being a lot more punishing than I expected. It can be, one of the challenges is the players are finding is they've got to have the right player in the right location, because some locations will be like computer manipulations, and some locations will be about interrogation, and some locations will be about searching for stuff. And you want to advise players this too, is you want to make sure that you've got the right person in the right location, and you may be in a situation where you get the wrong person in the wrong location, they can't get things done, and then you say, okay, I couldn't get anything done, next shift can so-and-so come over here and maybe try a better shot at it. There's assistance mechanisms in some cases, but you're going to find going back to locations with the right people is a pretty common thing. So just be aware it's punishing. Make sure I made this mistake at the beginning, I've corrected it, is make sure you understand the reroll system where humans can do a push once, and then replicants can do the push twice. I made that mistake and had to let people push as many times as they want, taking stress along the way. A mistake I had to back out. So, again, Electric Dreams for Blade Runner by Free League Publishing, a really interesting RPG. Might not be for everybody. But if you like the genre and you like detective stories, definitely worth a look at. And I'll let you know when I get finished. Everyone have a good day.